Alright, in this video we're going to analyze an example of an MMI question focused on medical ethics. If you're not familiar with the format of MMIs, which stands for multiple mini interviews, we have a video that will tell you all you need to know and even give you some examples of great responses to MMI questions. You can click the link on screen right now to check that video out. But in a nutshell, MMI questions typically fall into three categories: ethical, character development, and teamwork. And unlike secondary essay prompts, there's really no way to predict exactly which questions the interviewers for a particular school are going to ask you during your interviews. So the best way to prepare is to really familiarize yourself with the format of the interview, the criteria the interviewers are assessing for, and the types of questions that are typically asked. And then you want to practice as many different questions as possible until your responses feel almost like second nature to you. Our medical school interview question bank contains hundreds of the most common traditional and MMI questions, plus a sample response for each. It's a fantastic resource for traditional and MMI interview prep, so be sure to access it if you haven't already. It even includes a sample response to the medical ethics related MMI question we're going to cover in this video. With that, let's go ahead and jump into the question. It reads, a 21-year-old female arrives at the emergency room with vomiting, fever, and headaches. As the attending physician, you realize that this is not the flu. It's likely bacterial meningitis. After informing her of her diagnosis, your patient informs you that she doesn't believe you since her symptoms have gotten better after resting for a bit. She decides that she's going to refuse treatment and return back to her college dormitory. What should you do as the physician in this situation, knowing that bacterial meningitis can lead to death or permanent disability? Okay, so as with pretty much all of the ethics questions, this is a little tricky. And the best way to go about responding to any ethical MMI question is to ask yourself a couple of brainstorming questions. First, what is the primary problem? Filter out the details that aren't really important so you can get straight to the point. And second, what is this question testing? In other words, what do interviewers want to learn from my response? Remember that during your MMI, you will not be expected to know diagnostic criteria or even specific legal guidelines, especially since those can vary depending on where you're practicing. But the qualities that the interviewers will be assessing you for are things like respect for patient autonomy, beneficence, meaning working in the best interests of your patients, non-maleficence, meaning do no harm, respect for human rights, bedside manner, and thoughtfulness and reflectiveness. And something else you want to keep in mind is that you could be asked to play the role of a doctor and act out a conversation with the patient in this scenario. That's where the bedside manner really comes into play. So anytime you practice your response to an ethical question, it's a good idea to also practice giving your response in character. And when you're in character, you want to pay close attention to your tone and demeanor. So think about what words you'll use to describe your concerns to the patient and what questions you might ask her to assess the situation. Or on the other hand, how will you handle the patient if they react negatively to the decision you've made? Okay, so going back to those two questions, let's figure out what the primary problem is for this question. You've realized that the patient probably has bacterial meningitis, but she wants to go back to her college dorm. Once she leaves the hospital, she could take a turn for the worse, and she could also potentially spread this highly contagious disease to others. Next, you'll need to figure out what this question is testing. In this case, you don't need to worry about trying to diagnose your fictional patient based on how the prompt describes her symptoms. Instead, your interviewers are going to want to see that you prioritize her human rights, patient autonomy, and well-being, while also mitigating potential harm to the best of your ability. And in a role-playing scenario, they'll also want to see that you remain kind and calm, even if the patient doesn't return that energy to you. So there's no single correct way to respond to this question, but the most important consideration you'll want to make is, does the patient know what bacterial meningitis is? Does she know how serious it could be to herself and others? If not, have you explained it to her in a way she can easily understand so that she can make a fully informed decision about her care? If she has follow-up questions or concerns, like for example, if she's worried about the hospital bill or she's afraid of hospitals, you'll want to address them respectfully and with transparency. At that point, if she still refuses treatment, it's probably a good idea to get a hospital ethics consultant or legal team involved, since this case has serious potential consequences. You could also ask her if she'd like to contact people she trusts to help her make her decision. But as a legal adult, that choice is entirely up to her. Now, if you're role-playing this scenario and you can't convince the patient to accept treatment, you should know that it's not necessarily a reflection of your communication skills. So the interviewers may just want to see how you respond to a situation that doesn't go the way you want it to. And just keep in mind that do no harm applies both to the patient herself and to the wider community. So regardless of your patient's choice about her own treatment, it's your duty to try to prevent an outbreak by notifying the local public health department and our college, keeping her identity confidential. All right, that covers the foundation of what you need to know about this MMI ethics question. The guidance in this video can also be used to inform your preparation for other MMI ethics questions. And if you're looking for a full-length sample response to this question, along with hundreds more sample interview questions with full responses for each, be sure to check out our Med School interview question bank at the link here. Take care.